used for meeting the fancies of other people. Is this past karma? How can I change it? As I am one with the universe, my past sins can be forgiven. Now, there were a number of questions in there, of course, but I'd like to focus it onto two particularly. The first one, she's asking, she seems to be in an abusive situation, or perhaps a situation in which people generally, habitually are taking advantage of her, or perhaps mistreating her unfairly in some way. And then the second question is this simply her karma? Is there anything she can do to change that karma? And of course, the answer to the second question is yes, of course there is. But let me begin with the first one. I'd like to tell a story from the life of Paramahansa Yogananda, and this was in 1920. And at that time, he was in Calcutta, and he had just boarded the steamship that was going to take him to Boston in America. And the ship was getting ready to sail, and his friends and his family had accompanied him to the dock. And they had gone on to the ship to bid him farewell, and they were standing at the railing. And the captain came up to them, and he said in a very harsh and very undignified, disrespectful manner, he said, "Get off the ship or go to your cabin." And Master, hearing that, very calmly turned and looked at him squarely in the eye and very firmly said, but calmly, he said, "Sir, a gentleman does not speak in such a manner." And the captain looked down and was ashamed of himself and went away. Now, a very simple response, but something to notice in his answer. Yogananda was firm, he was calm, he was centered. He was also appealing to that captain's higher nature by addressing him as a gentleman, and he was respectful also, and he was very, very effective. Now, oftentimes, more often than we'd like to acknowledge sometimes, people find themselves in situations where people speak harshly to them, perhaps or treat them unfairly, use abusive language, things like that. This can happen in our home environment. Sometimes it happens in work environment. And the question comes up, as a spiritual devotee, what's the proper response to that? I don't want to get angry. I don't want to punch him in the nose or whatever those impulses that might come to us. What do we do? Well, Yogananda gave advice at this. He says, we should not allow ourselves to be a doormat. And of course, doormat physically, allowing people to harm us in any way, or even to take advantage of us. Now, there are times in our life where the greater good and the greater harmony of the situation we sometimes do have to endure. Those situations come up because we have to weigh the pluses and the minuses and the balance of what's for the larger good of the situation. But don't make a pattern of it, of simply allowing other people's bad behavior toward you. If you know it's wrong, it's not simply a matter of personal opinion, but you just know it's wrong behavior. Don't allow it to continue and subject yourself to that. And you have to do something about that. Now, it doesn't mean that you can always physically do something, because circumstances don't always allow that. But yet inwardly, we should resist. We should keep our self-respect and not allow ourselves to be degraded. But even on a higher level, we should try to reform that other person if there's even a possibility for that, to reach out to that person with a kind attitude, with respect, but yet also with firmness in the right of what your position is, and then move forward we can bring everybody up to a higher level. I had a friend who when he was a boy, he was bullied, and this is unfortunately something that happens often to people in today's world. But as a schoolboy, he was bullied by an elder, and somebody who's actually quite much larger than him. And he would not submit himself, you might say, psychologically to the bully. He resisted inwardly. He could not physically resist the bully, and in fact, the bully actually beat him. But inwardly, he kept his self-respect, and he did not submit inwardly to that person's bullying of him. Now, interestingly, the thing that happened was once that beating, he'd beat him, and after that, the bully never bothered him again because he saw that he could not break this person's will. And that was the important point. Now, even better, of course, is if you can actually convert that other person. In this case, the bully did not reform, but if you could actually help that person by sending out positive vibrations, perhaps praying for that person, seeing that person in a higher potential, that they're obviously not behaving in the way that their higher self wants them to behave, but you have to do something at least to resist that inwardly, mentally, so that you yourself do not become a victim of that and take on that consciousness. Like I say, though, there are certain situations where sometimes all you can do is mentally resist, and physically, and like in this case, you have to sometimes suffer. But don't allow it to become a habit. Don't become a doormat, is what Yogananda said. And if you see this pattern repetitively in your life, you see perhaps people are taking advantage of you, people are treating you unfairly, well, you may be caught in a situation where you cannot escape that. This does happen, particularly in family situations, but more so than employment situations. You can always quit and go get another job. But sometimes families are a little bit more difficult, but yet you have to continue to put out positive energy, at least mentally, toward that other person, and also maintain your own self-respect. But if it's something that you see happening in patterns in multiple circumstances in your life, you need to look and see, what is it about yourself that is allowing this to happen? There's a certain magnetism by our repetitive behavior that we begin to actually attract sometimes these situations. We lose confidence, and in that weakened state, we begin to allow situations from outside of ourselves to begin to control us. And we don't want that, but we need to resist it, and we need to look at, what is it? Do I need to somehow strengthen myself to be able to hold my self-respect, and also to be able to firmly, but with kindness, if it's appropriately shown, with confidence, and in an effort to perhaps even help another person to reform, I need to be able to address the situation. I had a person write to me recently how she was in a situation where she wanted to take up the path of meditation and become a disciple, and her family was adamantly against her and resisted her, and you might say did everything in their power to prevent that from happening. So she took the path of just merely being silent about it. She wouldn't share that, but in her private self, in her heart, and in her private moments, she continued to be a devotee and a disciple. And this went on for 10 years. And I just received a letter just recently saying, you know, Jaya, I want to tell you something. Since when I first told you about this situation 12 years ago, you remember how difficult that was. Now, 12 years later, I want to tell you, my husband is now becoming a disciple. He took up the path because she continued. And as a wife, she would pray for her family, pray for her husband, and do what she needed to do, but yet she continued to send out that positive energy, and finally her husband actually changed. So coming to the second question, is this a matter of karma? Well, of course, everything's a matter of karma, but karma is not immutable. We created that karma, so we can also take action to undo that karma. Sri Yukteswar said in his in Yogananda's autobiography, everything in future will improve if we take the right spiritual action now. And so this is don't worry about the past, but as you begin to change, as you begin to take on a more improved, self-confident, and firm magnetism in the right of what you're doing, you'll find that you begin to influence the world around you, and you begin to attract different reactions. But you must do it in the right attitude, not emotionally, not from a sense of being a victim, not in a complaining manner, but firmly, steadily, in a positive way. Go forward with your spiritual path, or whatever the situation might be that you find yourself in. Things will change. if you change your magnetism and the way you approach it with self-confidence, respect, and treating other people the way that you would like them to treat you. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. And if in future there are any questions or subjects that you would like us to cover, type them into the comments section, and we'll try in a future episode to address those comments. To register, go to join.anandaindia.org/wisdom. Joy to you.